So, it's as I pointed out that Moshe Rabbeinu, he didn't look like a typical Jew. He didn't look like anyone that anyone would respect, and he wasn't a Gadol Ador. He was a goy who grew up, amongst the goyim over there. And
maybe they all knew him as the Vaeira, second in command.
Yeah, of course they know him like that. Of course, yeah. But so it's very hard for them to get a connection with and to respect Moshe Rabbeinu as part of the Jewish people. And that's why those signs were given over to Moshe to show to the Jewish people that Kadosh Baruch Hu was really with them, and he was the real person who was coming to redeem the Jewish people. In fact, we find out such a case of the life of Moshe Rabbeinu that the story of the Brit Milah, that Moshe Rabbeinu didn't even give the Brit Milah to his son. He didn't give a circumcision to his son. I'm reading from Perusha Maccabee. Vayal Moshe l'shevet et ha'ish. I'll just read it quickly. Divrei Pilaim amru lanu Chazal b'davar hashbiyah sheshbiya Yitro et Moshe. So Yitro made Moshe Rabbeinu swear that he would fulfill this oath. What was the oath that he was supposed to fulfill? Amar Rabbi Eliezer Hamodai. Moshe Rabbeinu was be'eretz notzriya. He was in a foreign land, and he said that even though everyone is worshiping idols, I will worship the Kadosh Baruch Hu. Perusha afa bishul kol olam shekoveh ba'avodah zara or dafka mishum kach chayav ani la'avod et Kadosh Baruch Hu. Kach Lishmo el hamet, lefachot ani, right? I will be the only one, at least outside, where there's no Jewish people. Obviously, he was in Midian, but I will be the only one worshiping Kadosh Baruch Hu. Even Yitro was still worshiping all of his avodot zarot at that time.
He came to worship Hashem.
Moshe Rabbeinu had will to worship Kadosh Baruch Hu, right? At this time when he was running away from Egypt.
Yitro also, right?
No, so Yitro at this point was still. Yitro converted later on after he heard about the miracles, etc. Then he came to the Jewish people. Emnam ani nochri, I'm by myself, I'm a stranger, levad, boded, be'eretz nochriya, ava ani nisha shalem im HaKadosh Baruch Hu. V'af al pi Yitro mefresh mitafkido k'kohen la'avodah zarah. Even though Yitro, as Dina beautifully pointed out, Yitro is not in his assignment anymore as the head priest of avodah zarah, of idol worship, but he's still worshiping idols. He's still not. He's not with the emet. He's not with the emet right now, right? So, what was the hashpah? What was the pledge that Moshe Rabbeinu was forced or accepted upon himself to take when he lived amongst Yitro? Amalu Yitro kibel elecha davar zeh. Accept upon yourself this thing. Ben shielecha. Your first son will be for avodah zarah. It will be for idol worship. This was what Yitro made Moshe Rabbeinu swear. And if you have other children afterwards, they could be for Shem Shemaim. They could be worshiping of God. Kibel alav. Moshe kibel alav. Moshe accepted upon himself such an oath that his first son would worship idols.
Where did he learn the Masorah? Where did he learn how to be Jewish if he grew up with Pharaoh?
Hashem.
So obviously his mother Miriam, who's the midwife over there in the palace of Paro, fed him. Obviously, tried to install him. He, his Jewishness, and he was Yadut or whatever else. But he, obviously Moshe Rabbeinu wasn't educated in the Talmud Torahs and in the yeshiva. Obviously, he didn't go to those type of schools, but he was throwing words from certain people. So obviously he knew that he was a Jew. He went out to his people. He wanted to see their suffering. He knew that he was different than Jewish. Amalo ishpiali v'eshpialo. He swore to him that his first son, Moshe Rabbeinu, he swore to him that his first son would be a non-Jew, would be someone who worshipped idols.
He did carry it out, did he?
Neresh Yitro Asa. He didn't do a Brit Milah.
That's why he didn't do it.
He didn't do a Brit Milah to his son.
Oh, that's why it's supposed.
V'neresh Yitro Asa Adzeh Mishum Shapachad Me'am Yarog et Kol Mishpachto Al Shenatan et Sipor LaMoshe. So he was afraid. Yitro was afraid that if people would know that Moshe Rabbeinu was worshiping God amongst the Midianites, they would come and kill Yitro, because Yitro had given him his daughter Sipporah, and it would be a big balagan. So Yitro was afraid. So that's why he made this as a condition that Moshe Rabbeinu would have to give her a son to Avodah Zarah. She'einenu oved Avodah Zarah, aף על פי שייתכן שמשה היה יכול להסתיר את עבודתו, איננו עובד עבודה זרה, ולא ייתכן שיכול לגדל את בנו כך, בלי שאנשים יראו. Right? Even though Moshe Rabbeinu could have hid the idea that he was a Jew. I mean, he was like one of those Spanish Jews. They used to observe Judaism in the basement. The Maronites. Maranotes. So, the Anusim. So, they could have hid his Judaism in the basement, and nobody would have known about it. But his son, he couldn't hide that from the people, because the people would see that he wasn't
circumcising themselves in Egypt after Joseph died, or they sort of covered it over.
Yes. So I guess it wasn't hard for Moshe to over at the kav, to pass that line, being already that there were Jews who didn't circumcise themselves back in them. And if Moshe Rabbeinu would circumcise his son, everybody would recognize it. Everybody would see that his son was circumcised. Because he was fearful, he wanted Moshe to swear that he would not circumcise his son. And what Yitro said, that his second son could worship God, he didn't care about that. It seems that Yitro had a plan. Rav Kana writes over here. The Yitro had some type of plan that after the first son is born and he would worship, and he would be for Avodah Zarah, for idol worship, so then the second son would come along, and by that time he would assume that Moshe would also raise him in the style of Avodah Zarah. Rav Kana writes, how is it possible that Moshe Rabbeinu himself agreed to such a condition, not to circumcise his son? Right? It could be that Moshe Rabbeinu himself was afraid that if he wouldn't accept this condition, Yitro would take him and imprison him and bring him to Egypt, where he was wanted. He was a wanted man. He would be dead. So Moshe Rabbeinu said pikuach nefesh, a matter of life and death, is doche everything, all the mitzvot. Beautiful point. Dina points out that for Avodah Zarah, you're not allowed to you have to die. A person has to be willing to give up his life. The person has to be willing to give up his life. Beautiful point that Dina brings out over here. Meaning Moshe Rabbeinu didn't accept upon himself to worship idols. That wasn't the condition. His son. So that was okay. So it wasn't for him, for Moshe Rabbeinu, a matter of someone worshiping idols. So there's no doubt that Moshe Rabbeinu said to himself, he's a young boy, he's a child, so it's okay if he worships idols because he's under 13. And by the time he gets older, we'll be out of Midian, and I'll be able to teach him the right path.
If he can paskin like this, without ever having learned in a yeshiva, think of what he could have accomplished if he had said.
Right.
Yes, or knowing the whole Torah.
So the point is that we have a Moshe Rabbeinu who this is his upbringing, and this is his outlook, and he was even maskim to accept upon himself the condition that his son worship idols. Unfortunately, we later find by his grandchild. There's nothing that a person, even though his son Gershom didn't worship idols, right? He didn't worship idols in the end, but we know that anything that comes out from a tzaddik never comes out reik, meaning there's always something to it. So if Moshe Rabbeinu said that his eldest boy would be someone who would worship idols, there was something down the line that's going to happen. And what happened? His grandson misinterpreted the Torah in the time of Micha, and became the